Hi everybody, this is Mike. I'm one of the admins from the Facebook Moon Landing Hoax Group, and today I'd like to talk about a particular two sets of Apollo missions, Apollo 15 and Apollo 16, which both purportedly landed men on the moon. Okay, I'm showing you to the left here on my screen Apollo 15. That's photo number AS15. You can look it up. Magazine 87, photo number 11839. And this is a picture allegedly an astronaut took outside the lunar module, which allegedly landed on the moon. And Apollo 15 was, of course, one of the middle missions to have landed men on the moon. Allegedly, it was the first one to where they drove allegedly a car on the moon, or they call it the lunar rover. So you can see here a picture of the equipment that landed on the moon, and allegedly at least, and this foil that you see here, and this construction papery looking material, and these curtain rod looking materials and all that you see here. Allegedly they fit the car in there that unfolded, and they drove around that little dune buggy on the moon. Now, interestingly, in this photo, you can see the aft panels. And I've zoomed in here, and you can see they are taped together. Tape, tape, okay? And look how haphazard and sloppy that tape job is, okay? So they taped together the aft panels for Apollo 15, but what they didn't do was tape together the panels of Apollo 16. And you can see another photo allegedly taken from the Apollo 16 mission right after Apollo 15, allegedly having taken men to the moon. You can see Apollo 16, magazine 113, photo number 18331. And I'll show you how to look these up later. Well, you notice the panels here are not Scotch taped. And interesting, right? Well, I call it Scotch tape. Scotch is a brand of tape, of course, but any type of tape that you would use to put together, whatever you want to call it, bottom line is there's no tape. And lo and behold, the panels are buckling here, as you see, okay? Now you can see they got the same descent part, and allegedly in Apollo 16 they brought another one of those dune buggies to the moon. They call it the Apollo lunar rover, and that was stuffed away in here. They took it out, unfolded it, and if you believe it, they drove around the moon kicking up rooster tails, which of course rooster tails you see in the videos are impossible on the moon because the moon is a vacuum. There's no air on the moon, and rooster tails are clouds of dust where the air traps the dust particles and it creates the clouds. Otherwise, you would see particles moving in a parabolic arc. I'm arcing with my mouse to show you. That's how the dust, it might be slower, but it would arc and land. But in the Apollo lunar rovers, of course, they kick up these little dust clouds, and that means it's hitting air in the studio it's driving around in. But anyway, I'm getting a little sidetracked there. Those Apollo lunar rovers were stuffed away in the bottom part. But the top part, where I'm showing here, this is what's called the ascent stage. So how it allegedly worked was the rockets, you can see the bottom thruster right here. This burned, and of course there's no blast crater, but regardless of that, it burned to the ground in order to slow the descent to the moon. So this bottom part I'm circling here, this is called the descent stage. And then the top part is called the ascent stage, or the ascent stage, however you want to pronounce it. There's another rocket engine, allegedly, that blasted off from the surface of the moon. So this part would blast off into, and I'm going to show you in a moment, a lunar orbit where the command module would intercept and connect with this piece, allegedly. And then the two astronauts in this ascent stage would get out, go into the command module, and then fly back home to Earth, at least allegedly. And that happened for all the Apollo missions, allegedly, but the ones we're looking at today are Apollo 15 and 16, okay? So you can see it's taped in Apollo 15, It's not taped to Apollo 16. And look how that aft part there is buckling. Well, isn't that interesting? So, and how this would blast off allegedly, and I'm going to get to this in a minute, it's very interesting. This blasts off and goes into lunar orbit because there's a rocket engine allegedly inside the ascent stage I'm circling right here. And then here is where the fuel canister would be. And they have the fuel and an oxidizer together. They call it hypergolic rockets, hypergolic fuel. The two mix together, the fuel with the oxidizer, they're separate. It blasts. And of course, by the way, when this blasted off, there was no visible plume of fire. Well, I guess because there's no air on the moon and there's a vacuum, so I guess that would be the excuse as to why there's no rocket fire you show from the videos blasting up here. It just goes up, looks like a crane is yanking it off if you watch the video. But of course, the problem with that is this hypergolic fuel, when it blasts off, and we see other videos where they're in low Earth orbit, by the way, which is possible to travel low Earth orbit, the hypergolic fuel does show a blast, right? You can see a visible plume in outer space in low Earth orbit when there's also a vacuum and no air. But here, when they blasted off, I mean, obviously it was just a crane ripping this off and going up there. And little explosives they probably put on this bottom part to blow it up to make it look like a blast. But you don't see a plume of fuel spraying as the camera showed this allegedly going back up to lunar orbit. So anyway, that's the official story, if you will. Why is one not taped and the other is taped? Now, I'm going to show you another photo here, and this is where it gets interesting. Let me see if I can zoom in. No, that doesn't work. There we go. So Apollo 16, this is photo number 122, magazine number 122, 19533 and 19535. And 19534, by the way, you can look up, that's a pretty funny photo as well. Okay, so this is the ascent stage allegedly having blasted off into lunar orbit. And look at that. I'm zooming in here. Look at the condition of these aft panels. Is that because they refused to tape it? This is the only Apollo photo or video or anything in the record, by the way, where they show the aft panels in this condition. It looks like it got into a car accident, like somebody beep, 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 backed into it and ran. You can see the big indentation here. The panels are ripped apart. I mean, it just looks ridiculous, right? I mean, look at the condition of this thing, allegedly having blasted off, and I suppose the official story is the panels kind of tore and buckled, and maybe it was the tape, right? As I showed you earlier, Apollo 15, they scotch taped it together. I mean, was that necessary? Was that part of the Apollo engineering? I'm going to show you the only blueprints really we have from Apollo in just a moment on how allegedly it was put together, this lunar module as they call it. But if the engineering called for scotch tape on the back of Apollo 15, why is not and this was an engineering necessity, let's say, that they had to scotch tape it, right? They needed to save on weight, and it needed to be taped together. Well, why are these buckling panels you see here? Did they just forget to scotch tape it? And because they forgot to scotch tape it, is that why this is ripped apart and looking so, I don't know, I would be horrified if I were in that lunar module. But anyway, this is the only photo, Apollo 16, where they show the condition of the lunar module like this, the ascent stage as it's called, okay? So the rest of the Apollo missions, you don't see the panels crumpled like that. These are the only photos they took of the aft panel. And in my view, obviously, as we all know in our group here, it is impossible to send astronauts beyond low Earth orbit. You can only send human beings up through the first couple hundred miles within the Earth's what we call magnetosphere. The Earth projects an iron core. I'm sorry, the Earth has an iron core, excuse me, and it projects a magnetic field. That magnetic field blocks all the radiation from the sun and from exploding stars throughout the galaxy. Those exploding stars and radiation from the sun would otherwise kill us, right? That's why the Earth has an iron core, projects a magnetic field that blocks the radiation. Once you travel into that actual magnetic field area, then the radiation is too intense, which would explain why no astronaut has gone beyond low Earth orbit since 1972, which was the last Apollo mission, Apollo 17. So we're coming on 50 years, if you can believe it, where not a single other human being, other than those people in the 1960s and early 70s, allegedly at least, that have traveled beyond low Earth orbit, right? And you can say, well, the moon missions, of course, were real. It's just that we don't have the money to send people back to the moon. Well, why would we go to the moon again? Well, you have to remember, of course, that the moon is 240,000 miles away. And I apologize, I'm using miles. A lot of my audience is probably European, and I'm an American, of course, and we use miles here, so you have to forgive me. You can convert that. But you get it, right? 240,000 miles is a very long, long, long way to go, and that's how far away the moon is. Now, human beings, keyword is human beings, have only traveled up to the International Space Station, which is about 200 miles, a little bit north of that, above the Earth, right? So the distance between roughly New York to Boston is how high the International Space Station orbits the Earth. And the space shuttle, any craft containing human beings outside of an Apollo one, only went, upwards of about 400 miles, maybe a little higher than that, above the Earth, right? Which really isn't that high when you think about it, right? They call that low Earth orbit. So it's high enough where you're still falling around the Earth in a circle, but you go higher than that, then you get exposed to the deadly radiation. Now, unmanned craft, of course, can travel beyond low Earth orbit, robotic probes and whatnot. The James Webb Telescope, Hubble Telescope, all that. That's radio-controlled equipment. So that's one thing. But why Apollo is fake is because they cannot send human beings beyond low Earth orbit. And if you look at my prior live streams and you go to our Facebook group, the moon landing hoax, make sure to put the hyphen in between the moon and landing, the moon landing hoax. Or you go to my blog, stratagemsoftheright.blogspot.com. I have many different proofs of the Apollo missions being a hoax, right? There's my blog, as you can see. You can go there, check it out. I've got many different photographs that I've analyzed and aspects of the video record and various things where I prove Apollo 15 and Apollo 16 and all the Apollo missions alleging men to have traveled beyond low Earth orbit were faked, okay? So let's take a look at what allegedly was at this back aft panel I'm circling here that these panels were protecting. And this is just fascinating to me. Okay, so you can see here I'm highlighting, this is a nasa.gov website where they put the specs for the ascent stage for the lunar module, and here it goes, right? This is the back of the lunar module, the aft, if you would call it that, where these panels would be protecting equipment, right? So what are those panels protecting? Well, let's go here. It says GN and CS equipment. That's what these are right here toward the back. And what is that? That is the electrical power subsystem and the guidance, navigation, and control subsystems, okay? So these are basically the computer hardware, if you will, that allowed the navigation of the ascent stage, so it could connect with the command module that was orbiting, right? So you have the computer subsystem right here, and then this blasts off. This is the rocket, by the way, allegedly they were sitting on, that blasted off and took them to lunar orbit, which, by the way, they show video of the astronauts in here when they're allegedly blasting off. If this is rattling in a rocket, you would hear this loud engine noise inside the cabin. And of course, with the video, they show them blasting off with the camera. It's dead silent, right? And you can't even argue that they're just not recording sound. So one of the astronauts on one of the missions brought a tape recorder and played music in the cabin. So you hear the music blasting, but you don't hear this rocket engine blaring, which I find interesting, right? Of course, a rocket engine isn't going to make space sound, in a vacuum. But the problem is they're sitting right on top of the rocket engine. That's blasting. This is a pressurized cabin, which, by the way, it's pressurized in here. Apparently, there must be some type of other walls that protected the astronauts in here, because you can see the crumpled panels, right? And then that allegedly, at least, protected the guidance computer. I've got another infohow.org where they've uploaded another spec, and they call lunar module, it's LM lunar module guidance computer. So the guidance computer it's pointing is right there. Here's another arrow pointing to the guidance computer equipment right there. These panels that you're seeing right here are allegedly protecting that. And of course, somehow they still made it and connected an Apollo 16 and returned back to Earth, even though they forgot to tape the aft panels. Apollo 15 they taped, Apollo 16 of course they didn't. Well, isn't that fascinating, right? So anyway, I thought you'd find that interesting, a little bit funny to review. Now I'm going to show you quickly how to get these Apollo photos. You go to the Apollo Lunar Surface Journal in order to get them. And as I've said many times before in my prior live streams, they're on, I'm highlighting here at nasa.gov website, but they're managed by private parties. You have founder and editor emeritus Eric M. Jones, edited by Ken Glover. These people ostensibly are editing the journal, and I'll never get tired of pointing this out. On the front page of the Apollo Lunar Surface Journal, which, by the way, is where all the records are stored of Apollo. This is the best resource we have for the plebs, you and me, to find out about any information about the moon landings and Apollo. This is where we go to get it, okay? So we look at it right here, and it says, if you can believe it, the journal is, in Neil Armstrong's words, a, quote, living document and is constantly being modified and updated. Please don't hesitate to let us know about errors. We want to get it right, but sometimes that can take a while. We would like to thank everyone for their help and patience. You may email the editors concerning typos, factual errors, and general comments at apollolunarsurfacejournal@gmail.com. And that's just hilarious, because in Neil Armstrong's words, is a living document. That means they can modify it at any time. So if there's a photo they don't like, they can remove it, they can Photoshop it, they can change it. That's what living document means, right? Otherwise, I mean, the record is the record, right? Why would it need to be a, quote, living document? Why would there be factual errors that we plebs on the internet are going to email and say, hey, you know, blah, 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 what is, I'm looking at these photos, they don't look right to me. And what they'll do then is they'll put a little bullshit, excuse my language, excuse on the Apollo Lunar Surface Journal, and on a future live stream I'll show you some examples of that. But that's how it works, right? I mean, they do damage control for NASA. You go to this email, you report any weird things you find in the Gmail, and then they make up some nonsense excuse for it, okay? How do you get the photos, okay? Because some trolls might say, well, those are Photoshop. Those aren't real, right? Well, I'll show them you myself, right? hqnasa.gov, ALSJ, that's the Apollo Lunar Surface Journal. You can click through the journal. You go to Apollo 16, for example, and here's an example of a photo, 16122195535. click it, boom, there it is. Look at that. The panels are all torn up. That's how you would get the photo from the Apollo Lunar Surface Journal. There's other places you can get these photos, by the way. There's another one. Look at that. Look at that. It's just hilarious. That is the condition, allegedly, of the back panels with the guidance computer for Apollo 15. This buckling, of course, didn't cause depressurization. They were fine. And the guidance computer that was all the way back here, well, guess what? That was fine, too. It was okay for this to buckle, of course, right? But anyway, that's how you get the photos. You go to the Apollo Lunar Surface Journal. And like, for example, this is Apollo 16. You click that. They got all the magazines listed. So you can click whatever magazine you want to go to, 113, find the photo, click it, boom, you're there. And then we have the same deal with Apollo 15, okay? You can click that and then go through all of the different photos, the journal, find any photo you want. So anyway, I found that pretty interesting. If you like these live streams, please make a comment and like. I'm also going to be putting these up on YouTube. We seem to be getting a lot of subscribers to YouTube. Our Facebook page, of course, has 42,000 subscribers almost to it, which is fantastic. I'll show you right here. Check that out. We've got 41,900 members. Our YouTube page only has 315. So if you are a Facebook member of our group, please switch over and subscribe to our YouTube channel, which I will show you real quick how to do that. You go to youtube.com, and if you type moon landing hoax, you won't find us, right? You'll just find those classic debunking videos, right? They want to debunk us and say, yeah, they did land on the moon. Was the moon landing faked? Neil deGrasse Tyson, he's going to say no, it wasn't faked. You guys are all nonsense. Isn't it interesting? You're looking for evidence of a hoax. You can't find any of that, right? All our videos are demonetized. I don't monetize any of our videos here, by the way, but and they're buried in the search engine. So if you go to Google, you won't find us. We're all shadow banned. So to find us, you got to type MLH Livestream. Okay, is that going to work? Let's find out. No, that's not good enough, because these are labeled under MLH Livestream. What if we put number 2, MLH Livestream number 2? We still won't find it, right? Because I have an MLH Livestream number 2 on there. Let's try number 5, right? Okay, good. So literally you have to type MLH Livestream number 5, boom, and find our page that way. And I've got all these live streams up here if you want to take a look at them. Anyway, that's about all. We'll do another live stream later on another day. You guys have a great day, and look forward to seeing you on the next live stream. Goodbye and take care. Bye-bye now.